Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk, Commerce Deployments, Updates, and Servicing. My name is Nina, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. By participating in this session using Microsoft Teams, your name, email address, phone number, and/or title may be viewable by other session participants. If you do not consent to being a part of a recorded session, please disconnect at this time. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the event. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Now let's get started. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Amar Alakap-Band, Senior Program Manager, and Petri Simulin, Senior Program Manager. Amir, over to you.
Thank you, Nina, and thanks everybody for joining us for this session on commerce deployments, updates, and servicing. Today we'll talk about a range of different topics. So we'll first look at our system architecture at a high level. I know many of you may have already attended our system architecture talks, so we'll primarily just do a quick recap so that we're able to identify components and component names, and so we have a common understanding of the terminology that we'll use through the remainder of the talk. We'll then talk largely about recent improvements and enhancements in the space of deployment and updates for commerce components. And then we'll talk about specifics of deployment and servicing for e-commerce. So with that, let's first take a look at our component architecture. On this diagram, let's start from the left-hand side of the picture. On the left-hand side, we have our IT pro personas. And this could be a persona working in a customer organization as an IT administrator, or this could be a persona working for an implementation partner helping specific implementation projects for customer go-lives. So for this persona, the primary management plane, as many of you might know, is the Lifecycle Services web portal. And within this web portal, multiple different lifecycle operational capabilities are available for managing a Dynamics 365 commerce environment. Within the actual runtime of the environment, we have a few different categories of workloads. The first category of workloads is our back office workloads. In back office workloads, we typically support back office operations for commerce, as well as finance, supply chain, and talent workloads available there. The typical persona are going to be back office information workers accessing the Commerce HQ or the back office web client from their browsers. This is also the primary component for interaction for a call center agent who may be processing call center sales and orders. Then in the middle, we have our operational workload. So this operational workload that I've shown here, the first one is for your brick and mortar stores. So these are your in-store components, such as your point of sale and hardware station and mobile devices, as well as peripheral devices that allow for processing of sales transactions in a retail store. These are backed by our commerce scale unit, and our commerce scale unit itself may utilize multiple other services behind the scenes to provide a more enhanced and improved experience for operations in the store. This commerce scale unit is an omni-channel scale unit in that it powers both our in-store components and it also powers our native e-commerce capabilities that we have shipped as of the start of last year, which leads us into our next workload, which is our e-commerce workload. So within Dynamics 365 Commerce, we provide native e-commerce capabilities. These capabilities for an administrator are available within what we call our site builder tool. So your personas here are typically going to be content authors, site designers, site builders, and so forth. And they're able to access the site design and administrator tooling in Site Builder. And finally, your e-commerce website visitors, they are able to visit your e-commerce website. And the e-commerce website has a front end, which renders all of the assets and artifacts for a consumer. And it has a backing by the commerce scale unit for rendering, master and transactional data, and the processing of business logic operations. Then we have integrations available through CDS as well as Azure Data Lake. So that allows for large scale analytics as well as integrations with other Dynamics as well as non-Dynamics products in a seamless fashion. This gives you a high-level overview of which components are involved in the system architecture and what our primary management plane is. So right now, our primary management plane is in the Lifecycle Services portal, but over the coming iterations, you will see us align more and more towards the Power Platform Admin Center. But at this point, we'll focus primarily on the Lifecycle Services Experiences portal. So with that out of the way, let's look at a snapshot of what's new and what's been delivered in the recent past. The first one is the ability to deploy additional scale units. Many of you would know, and many of you are actually using multiple different scale units with a single LCS environment. Until now, though, for additional scale units beyond the first one, we required you to submit a support request indicating the region and the quantity of scale units that you wanted in your environments. We now have provided self-service capabilities. We'll talk about that to be able to deploy additional scale units. Lifecycle operations history. So this is like an audit trail that is available for you to view in LCS for Commerce Scale Unit. We made perf and reliability improvements for servicing downtime for CSU. So this was quite eagerly asked for by our customers. We made considerable improvements here, and we'll talk about that. We'll go over region availability for CSU. We've expanded to additional regions. Then we'll talk about auto update for CSU, when it's going to be available and what it means for you. We'll also look at self-service deployments for Commerce HQ, which is available and what impact it has on you. And then we'll talk about what capabilities are coming soon in terms of CSU manageability and what things we have in the pipeline in a planned phase. The first one we're going to look at is deploying additional CSU. We looked at our telemetry data and we determined that most customers who do use multiple scale units, at this time, most of them deploy 2 scale units, and the number of customers who deploy more than 2 scale units right now is quite limited. What we've done with this capability is we allow you to self-service deploy a second scale unit in your environment. So if you've already deployed the first scale unit, with this capability, you can deploy a second scale unit without calling into Microsoft support to provision it for you. So you can self-select which region and which version you want to deploy with. And also at the same time, you can select if there's a specific extension package that you want to deploy as part of that deployment of CSU itself. One thing I do want to mention here as a caveat is at this point, we have not implemented licensing, validation, and enforcement. And so what that means is we do require that you self-validate whether you have the right license entitlements for an additional scale unit available to you in your tenant subscription before you go ahead and deploy that second scale unit. The reason we say that is you are still required to comply with licensing guidelines and software license terms so that you do not exceed the license entitlements that are available to you and that you have procured for your organization. So you can view your license entitlements both in LCS subscriptions page as well as in Microsoft 365 Administrator Center. We do have plans for a date which is still to be announced for when we do want to build in automated license validation as part of scale unit deployment itself so that you don't have to go look it up yourself and that we look up exactly how many scale unit entitlements you have available and allow you to deploy exactly that many. That is not yet available, but is planned for future improvements. The second thing I want to talk about is the ability to view recent operations that have been applied to your CSU in your environment. This has also been something that's been heavily requested by our customers and partners. especially relevant for implementations where there is a large team of IT administrators working on a given environment. By being able to have a common source of truth in terms of an audit trail of all the operations that have happened on any particular scale unit, it really helps to make sure all members of the team are on the same page and are aware of the changes that have happened in the environment. We did go the extra mile to make sure we presented to you as much supporting metadata information as we possibly could. So if you click through on any given scale unit in your environment, select history, you're able to see this view on the right-hand side screen. And within this view, each row corresponds to a specific operation. So besides the expected status completed, success or failed, and when it started and completed by whom, we do provide detailed metadata around extensions. So if you've applied an extension, we tell you what version of the extension was applied, what the name of the extension was, who the publisher of the extension was, what SDK version you used, and so forth. So this really helps you be aware of precisely what changes happened and when and what the impact of those might be on your environments. The next thing I want to talk about is also something that's been asked significantly by many customers and partners, is to make improvements in servicing, reliability, and performance. We made a couple of significant enhancements to CSU servicing capability, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The first one that we've invested in is multi-geo support for CSU deployment. And this is an improvement we made behind the scenes. So it's not going to be obvious to you in the UI, but what we've done is previously our deployment system infrastructure was based in a single data center in the United States. And so if you wanted to deploy a CSU in Australia or a CSU in Europe or in Asia, our deployment system in the United States would actually run the orchestration of deployment and copy over the binaries to that data center, let's say halfway across the world. And because of that, the time that it would take to deploy as well as to update CSU, especially for CSUs based outside of the United States, it could take considerably longer than for CSUs based inside the United States. What we've done now is we've now created multiple instances of our deployment system across the globe. Right now we have 3 different geographies distributed around the world, so that when we deploy artifacts to a CSU, we deploy it from the nearest data center for that particular CSU. And that has significantly improved deployment and servicing times. That capability at this point has been rolled out to CSUs for sandbox environments. And so in this chart, you'll see for sandbox environment CSUs, the 75th percentile is about 16 minutes, and 90th percentile 18 minutes, and in the worst case 99th percentile is still under an hour. And we are in the process of rolling out that support also for CSUs in your production environment. So you can expect to see considerable improvements in your production environment CSU deployment comparable to what you see in Sandbox. The second thing we've done is our execution engine for deployments for CSU was running into some reliability challenges. So we overhauled the execution engine and we used a much more scalable piece of infrastructure and much more reliable piece of infrastructure. So we see much fewer instances of really complex deployments timing out or running into error conditions. And that's another improvement you'll notice is your updates and deployments are much more likely to be successful than before. So our reliability has significantly improved. So with those 2 changes overall and the improvements that we're going to be rolling out to production environments, you're going to see considerable improvement to the lifecycle experience of CSU deployment and servicing. In addition to this, we are also actively investing in reduced or near zero downtime updates, especially driven by requirements for our e-commerce customers. We are going to announce more specifics of that at a later date, but briefly speaking, we're planning to deliver those improvements in 3 specific phases. In the first phase, we're going to enable zero downtime browsing and search experiences for operations that rely on CSU. So if you are browsing products, you're searching for specific products, those will be the first experiences we'll light up in a near zero downtime experience. The second set of experiences are going to be cart operations. So add to cart, edit cart, modify cart, remove from cart. So those operations are going to be the second ones. And the third one is going to be the checkout operation and everything else in addition to these 3. That's the sequence we are targeting. We'll have more specifics to announce at a later date, including the expected timeline for delivering these. Next thing we want to talk about are improvements to region availability to CSU. So the blue boxes here are the regions where we have CSU available for deployment in GA mode, meaning there's no capacity restrictions. We've also shown on this diagram the red regions where we are able to support you, but it's a limited capacity region. So we cannot guarantee we'll support you, but if you have a strong enough need, we can tackle this on a case-by-case basis. We have expanded both our GA regions and our limited capacity regions. For the generally available regions, we've added North America, Canada Central, and Canada East. Canada was a region that was heavily requested by many of our large customers, so that's good news there. In Europe, we've added UK South and UK West, which was also heavily asked for. In limited capacity regions, we've added Switzerland North in Europe, and we've added South Central and North Central US in North America. Region availability for e-commerce and ratings and reviews. We have 3 discrete regions where you can deploy e-commerce and ratings and reviews. We have North America, Europe, and Asia. There is one caveat, and the caveat I do want to mention is just because we indicate that we have 3 regions available for deployment of e-commerce does not mean those are the only regions where you can use e-commerce. You can, as an administrator, reside in any region, even outside of these 3 regions. And likewise, your website visitors can reside in any of the regions outside of the regions indicated here. This just shows you geographic proximity, so it helps with planning in terms of optimized latency for your website visitors, and is in no means a limitation in terms of where you can access this from. If you wanted to know which regions you can actually purchase our license subscriptions from, please visit our Dynamics website and look at the region availability and localization guide, which will provide a much more comprehensive view of that information. So this is purely infrastructural detail in this slide. The next slide here, this is about availability, region availability of recommendation service. So this is the United States, Canada, and Australia at this point. And again, the same thing applies as before. You can have commerce scale units deployed in any other region. They don't have to be in the same regions as your recommendation service. Although wherever possible, it is always preferable to have your commerce scale unit and your recommendation service closer instead of farther away from each other for optimal performance and latency. Now let's talk about auto update for CSU. So many of you might have heard this before, but we have been working on auto update for CSU for some time now. Auto update capability for platform and for back office has been in place for quite some time now. So with this new capability, we are extending the same feature set to our commerce scale unit, which is deployed in the cloud. So what does that mean? That means all of the scheduling and pausing capability that you have available today for managing auto updates for back office. They're going to be consistently applied to Commerce Scale Unit. Orchestration between sandbox and production and the time periods and the time that you're allowed to validate and or cancel updates, the same applies to CSU as it does for back office. And we continue to support self-service update for CSU even with auto update in place. The public preview is ready, so for anybody who is interested in kicking the tires and providing us early feedback, go ahead and send an email to this email address and provide your LCS environment ID or your customer organization name, and we'll go ahead and enroll you in that. Now let's take a look at the standard orchestration flow for auto update for CSU as it is designed today. So imagine you have one sandbox UAT environment and you have a production environment. Each of them has a back office and a couple of CSUs deployed. In the standard orchestration flow, we'll first update your sandbox UAT environment, and within your sandbox UAT environment, we're first going to update your HQ component, and then we're going to update one CSU in your sandbox UAT environment. So we're not going to update all of the CSUs in your sandbox UAT, only one, and it's going to be chronologically the first one that you have deployed in your environment. Once you're good with this, after 5 days, your production environment update kicks in. And for your production environment, we're going to update your HQ environment first. And then we're going to, in parallel, update all of the CSUs in your production environment. So that's going to be kind of the flow. In Sandbox, only one CSU will be auto-updated. In production, all CSUs will be updated. And of course, as before, you do have the option to configure the schedule for auto update if you want to pick a specific time period from the available time slots and available time zones. You can pick that, or you can just leave it to default and we'll pick a specific time period for you. The other flow that we still support in addition to auto update is the self update, which means you get about a month or more before your auto update kicks in to self update and self apply an update in your environment. So with self update, what we recommend is take your sandbox environment, update your HQ, and then self update each of the CSUs. And likewise, go to production, self update HQ, and self update CSU1 and CSU2. Now you might ask, why would you want to self update? And why wouldn't you just let auto update kick in? There could be some reasons. The first reason being with self update, you are able to get updates sooner than waiting for auto updates. So if you wanted updates quick and early, you could do that by self update. The second reason is with self update, you are able to get much more granular control over this orchestration flow. So for instance, for some of our customers, they might say, you know, this weekend, they might want to self-update the HQ in their sandbox environment. And the next weekend, they might want to self-update CSU. And likewise in production, one weekend, they might update HQ. Second weekend, they might update one CSU. Third weekend, they might update the second CSU. And that gives them the fine-grained control to be able to roll out the updates in a staged fashion to minimize any impact to their business. And even with self-update in place, our deployment and orchestration system is fairly smart in that if it determines that you have already self-updated either the HQ or any of the CSUs, it is going to skip the update for that monthly update. It's not going to cause an additional downtime, so you don't have to worry about that. And vice versa, if you usually self-update and for some monthly update, you decide not to self-update, it also knows when you haven't self-updated, and so it can automatically kick in with the auto-update schedule as determined for your environment. So it tries to be smart in determining what and when to update. Here's the configuration you might have already seen in LCS, where you're able to view the update calendar and you're able to pause up to 3 monthly updates. There is no new configuration that we require you to maintain for CSU, whatever configuration is available over here is going to apply both to CSU and your back office components. And your pause schedule also applies to CSU. So all of this is completely consistent and applies uniformly to CSU auto updates as well as it applies to back office updates. From a notification standpoint, we have in-app notifications today available for upcoming scheduled updates, and the same notification is also applicable to CSU updates because they're running on the same schedule, so the same notification applies. There is one difference though, in that the email notifications that you get today before we start updates to your environment and after we complete the updates and so forth. In addition to those email notifications, you are going to get an additional set of notifications specific to CSU updates. And the reason why we plan to have a specific set of updates for CSU is because the execution status as well as the success and or failure or completion time of updates for CSU may be different from that of your back office. So for instance, your update for back office may start at, let's say, 7:30 a.m. and it might complete by 8 a.m. Whereas your CSU auto update may start at 8 a.m. and complete by 8:15 a.m., right? So you're able to very specifically get detailed granular notifications of the execution of each of those steps. And in the rare instance that if one of the updates fails or a rollback is scheduled or it kicks in, you're also able to get granular details on that. So maybe your HQ update succeeded, maybe your extension deployment for CSU ran into an error condition, the system rolled back. So you'll get a detailed email notification for that one as well. For the public preview timeframe, if you sign up right now, email notifications for CSU are not yet available. They are in the pipeline and we expect to have them available pretty soon and they'll seamlessly light up for you once you are in the public preview timeframe. It'll just take maybe another 1 or 2 monthly updates to have that available. Then once you have received your notifications and once the update has kicked in, and once the update has completed, you can then go back to your LCS CSU history update page and you can see when the update was applied. So if you notice the field I've highlighted here, the started by field. In this one, if you look at the value of started by, if it says by Microsoft, then it indicates that this was an auto update, whereas it was if this was a self update by an individual in your organization, you'll see the name of that individual in this column, and that's how you can determine which updates were auto updated by Microsoft versus self updated by you in your organization. And with anything else for the environment details page, you get this information granularly available for each CSU that is deployed in your environment. So you can see this one is for my North Central US 1 CSU. And if I wanted to know the history of a different CSU, I could click into that CSU history itself and see the history for that one. Then let's talk about some frequently asked questions about auto update. The first one is, when will it start? So public preview is available now. Please sign up if you are interested. And the full rollout for GA for this feature is targeted for the first half of this calendar year. More specific dates are to be announced. And as and when we start rolling out to your environment, look out for email notifications coming in to the IT administrators and project managers that are assigned to your LCS project. Can you opt out of auto updates? We do provide the ability to pause up to 3 monthly updates, just like you do today for back office. The same will be available for CSU auto updates as well. How often will auto updates be applied? It'll be the same schedule and cadence as it is today for back office. This is typically once a month, but multiple times a year we skip during peak season periods for many of our customers. And we will match the same cadence as for CSU. The availability calendar is available on our doc site, and you'll be able to access this link once the deck is available and uploaded. Then people ask about downtime. Will the auto updates cause a downtime? Right now, yes, but you have a couple of ways to mitigate that. The first one being the downtime schedule itself is user configurable, like you already know. For back office, the same scheduling capability is also available for CSU auto updates. And you also have self-service capability available for early update before auto update kicks in. So you can pick any arbitrary time that best suits your organization. And I also mentioned that we're actively investing in near zero downtime updates. So soon enough, we'll get to a point where scheduled updates will cause minimal to no disruption to your environments. Then people ask whether auto update will also update in-store components. In-store components right now are not planned for auto update, but we do support up to 12 months of backwards compatibility for in-store components. Another relevant point I'll mention here is the nuance between modern point of sale and cloud point of sale. So modern point of sale is installed on a user's or an organization's physical point of sale device in the store. And the mechanism for updating that is either ad hoc on that device, or we also support mass update capability using System-Centered Configuration Manager or any other mass deployment tools. With that said, for customers who prefer a lightweight deployment and do not have requirements for offline capability, if you choose to use Cloud POS with a cloud-hosted commerce scale unit, that Cloud POS will also get auto-updated with commerce scale unit in the cloud. So in some way, there is a way to get some auto-update capability even for in-store components, but only for specific topologies. Then people ask about whether they can test the updates before these go to production. So yes, you get 5 days after we apply an update to your sandbox UAT environment to make sure there are no regressions to your workflows, and you can choose to skip that particular update from being applied to your production environment. But in addition to those 5 days, you also get considerable time before then to self-deploy and self-update your sandbox UAT environment to validate the update. So the 5-day period is the last line of defense you get, but you also get up to 1 full month before then to take extra time if you need to. And people ask, can the testing be automated? We are actively investing in RSAT, our test automation capabilities, both for back office as well as for channel operations. And you'll continue to see improvements in this space from us. So more and more of your testing can be more hands-off and automated. Next thing I want to talk about is the enhancements to self-service deployment. So many of you might know we support self-service deployments for back office components today. This is currently primarily for net new customers who have not previously been using Dynamics. And the advantage of these self-service deployments are multiple fold. The first one, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is the downtime or the total time it takes for the deployments to complete is dramatically faster than before. So typically you might expect before multiple hours of deployment time, and now it's in as little as 30 minutes for deployments. The second big improvement with self-service deployments, as the name indicates, is previously for tier 2 environments, you needed to quote request these and file a support request for the support team to actually deploy the environment in your LCS project, and that could take sometimes several days, up to a week in certain cases. Now this is completely self-serve available. So on demand, you can click and choose to deploy a tier 2 environment, and it gets deployed on demand. So you no longer have to submit a request and wait for it to be processed. That's a huge improvement. And there are other scalability and performance improvements that also come with it. With that said, for your system to be compatible for self-service deployments, there is a change to the extensibility packaging story. So if you are a customer who is net new going live on Dynamics for Commerce, you'd look at the diagram on the right, which I've labeled after. And in this model, what you essentially do is you create 3 different extensibility packages for your customizations. So you create one package for your back office artifacts. So these include artifacts for Commerce HQ, as well as extensions to the app model that you might have, both for commerce as well as for finance or supply chain if you're using those, and any platform artifacts. So you combine all of those into a single all-in-one package. So you might have heard the term all-in-one package referenced before by the platform workflow. And previously this was optional. Now this is mandatory for self-service deployment, that all deployments to back office are all-in-one packages. So you take your artifacts for HQ, and when you talk about Commerce HQ artifacts, this could both be app model changes, but it could also be payment connector changes, and it could also be pricing engine changes. All of those packed into Commerce HQ and deployed to Commerce HQ. Then all of the extensibility artifacts for your CSU in the cloud, we have a new package type for that. And for that package type, you essentially package it and you upload it to LCS and you directly deploy it to CSU in the cloud. So that is pretty standalone and independent. And then you have a third package type, which are your self-service packages, which you package, upload to LCS asset library, which you can then access from your Commerce HQ environments. These are going to be your artifacts for point of sale and hardware station and so forth. Now, if you compare it to before we had something, and we still have it at this point, a retail deployable package. And the idea here was to consolidate all the different artifacts into one deployable package, and then redeploy that package in Commerce HQ and CSU Cloud. And then via Commerce HQ deploy the artifacts for in-store components. With the new model, we have significant benefits actually as well, more so than just being required for support for self-service deployments. And the first big advantage we have is the deployment times for artifacts when you're deploying Commerce HQ packages is going to be substantially lower, because your Commerce HQ artifacts are no longer going to include a very large payload of self-service packages. The second benefit is your CSU deployments are also going to be much faster, and they're going to upload faster, and they're going to fail much less than they have before, because CSU artifacts are going to be also very, very slimmed down in size. And the self-service packages themselves also are going to be slimmed down because they're not carrying the other package payloads within them. And the other improvement we made is your self-service packages are no longer now deployed to Commerce HQ. Although the functionality that we had before is preserved and it's transparent to you, but behind the scenes, you've significantly improved the process. So you can still go to Commerce HQ and download the artifacts for your in-store components, but the performance is going to be much, much faster in terms of you being able to access those from Commerce HQ. And more importantly, when you want to update the self-service packages, or when you want to add a customization to your self-service packages, you no longer are required to deploy an extensibility package to Commerce HQ, and thereby you minimize or you alleviate the need for additional downtime for Commerce HQ. So this is like zero downtime way of getting these packages available in Commerce HQ for deployment. Next, I'll talk about a capability which is in the works and coming soon, and this is the ability to self-serve delete operation for CSU. This has been asked for by many of our customers who want to, especially in sandbox UAT environments and pre-go live in their production environments, customers who want to start from a clean sheet of paper again and hit reset and not have to worry about the CSU that is already in place. So this delete capability allows you to just click delete on a CSU and confirm, and it actually deletes that CSU. We do want to caution that once you delete the CSU, any data that is in the CSU would be lost and cannot be recovered. What we advise you is make sure you have synchronized all the transaction data that you want to save from the CSU back into HQ. But there are still going to be certain pieces of data that don't synchronize back to Commerce HQ. In particular, if you're using channel side reports, which rely on transient data available in CSU, that data is going to get reset if you delete your CSU, and the data will kind of start from zero again. So that is one impact we've commonly seen. So use this capability with caution. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Petri to talk about e-commerce deployment and servicing.
Thank you, Amer. And for the audience, my name is Petri Simolin. I'm a Senior Program Manager for Dynamics 365 Commerce. And like mentioned, I will be talking a bit about the e-commerce deployment and servicing. The e-commerce environments are initialized and managed from the Lifecycle Services portal, which you are probably already familiar with. Amer mentioned LCS a couple of times earlier during the presentation. The CSU commerce scale unit has to be deployed before e-commerce can be initialized. The e-commerce environments integrate with the commerce scale units for omnichannel configuration information, product information, and actions such as cart management, and so on. E-commerce environment management is performed from the e-commerce tab from the Environment Features Management view. An Environment Features Management view can be accessed from the Environment Details page by clicking the Manage link under the Environment Features, and then switching to the e-commerce tab as shown on the screenshot to the left. Before e-commerce initialization begins, it requests the following information from the user. E-commerce environment friendly name. This one needs to be unique and it will not be visible to the end users. It's a friendly name which you use to immediately recognize which environment this is. Then there's supported host names. They are essentially virtual host names that are associated with the environment, and there will be no actions like domain reservation performed based on this information. Environment can also be accessed using the generated host names that are automatically generated based on the environment friendly name. And primary geography can be selected at this point. By default, the optimal geography is selected based on the region of the CSU. And this will be the primary read and write geography. Multiple read geos with automatic replication is supported, but initializing that requires assistance from Microsoft. This feature is planned to be offered as self-serve at some point later. And the next information that is requested is AAD security group for e-commerce administrators. This is something that can be modified later through the site builder. For ratings and reviews, user can choose if ratings and reviews is provisioned for this environment or not. And if ratings and reviews is provisioned, user needs to enter AAD security group for the ratings and reviews moderators. And this can be the same group as the administrator security group. And also it can be changed later in the site builder. E-commerce is initialized with the module library. It used to be called Store Starter Kit, SSK, if you are familiar with that term. And it comes with a set of modules and a functioning Fabricam demo site. From the diagram at the bottom of this slide, you can see the relationships between different LCS and e-commerce concepts. Environments are created in LCS projects. CSUs are deployed for the environment. E-commerce environment is initialized and associated with a CSU. And e-commerce environments can host multiple sites, which in turn can have multiple channels. And by channels here, we mean the e-commerce channels that are defined in the site builder and associated with the online channels in the HQ. Next slide, please. E-commerce servicing. E-commerce services are offered with a software as a service model, and they are automatically updated with no downtime, and the updates generally do not require actions from the customer. The exception to this rule is the SDK and module library, which requires a manual update. Updating the SDK and module library requires pulling the latest versions from the repository and deploying them with the other e-commerce customizations. SDK and module library depend on the CSU, and the highest version of module library that can be deployed depends on the version of the CSU. And generally, CSU should be updated first before deploying new SDK and module library. And more information and the latest versions can be found from the link on the slide. Next slide, please. From this slide, additional documentation can be found from these locations. You will be receiving the materials later, so you can have the links. Next slide, please. And here you can see the upcoming sessions that are related to this topic that you might want to attend as well. And that is all for me. Thank you. And now handing back to you, Nina.
All right, thank you, Petri. So yeah, everybody, thank you for joining today. We would like to get your feedback on the session. I have posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We value your feedback and welcome your input on how we did and what you would like to see in future sessions. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the TechTalk's Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and thank you to our audience for logging in and joining us. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are.